Hello, everyone. Jonathan Roberts here, the External Affairs Director at the CLA. I'm joined by Charles Trotman, our Chief Economist, and Gavin Lane, our Deputy President. And we're going to be talking over the next 10 minutes or so about the US trade deal. Ever since we left the European Union, of course, we've had the power to sign our own free trade deals as a country. There's been many rollover deals and a few other bespoke deals along the way, but this seems like quite a big one, and certainly one that both the Conservative Party in government and now the Labour Party in government have been chasing. Charles, why don't we come to you first, and why don't you tell me what's actually been agreed?
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I think there are two points or two parts to this. Firstly, is that the UK and the US administration have agreed to 13,000 tonnes each of beef can be exported by each nation to the other. So that means that 13,000 tonnes of US beef will come into the UK, but it will be tariff free. Before we had the deal, there was a 20% tariff and there was a maximum quota of 1,000 tonnes. So that's important. I think the second aspect is that the UK has also agreed what's called a preferential tariff for bioethanol exports from the US. So that tariff is now at 1.4 billion litres, which again will have a major impact on UK producers, arable producers. So it's a historic point, you could say. But of course, we haven't seen the real detail yet. And I think, as importantly, the government has said that the red lines that we insisted upon, which are animal welfare, environmental and food safety standards, are adhered to. And the UK government has said that they have been. Whether that will be the case in the future, obviously, we don't know.
Now, the volumes of beef that we're talking about, they're pretty small. What possibility do you think there is that the US are using this deal as a way of getting a foot in the door, as a way of increasing that volume over time?
I think if you look back over history, 13,000 tonnes, I would agree, is pretty small. But if you look at UK exports of UK beef to the US, they're minimal. And that's primarily because of the ban imposed by the US on BSE, or because of BSE. So you could say 13,000 tonnes is a small quantity. But after a period of time, and we think it's likely to be 10 years, then that 13,000 tonnes tariff will no longer be in place. So the US will be able to export as much of its beef to the UK as it possibly, or as it would wish to. So there wouldn't be a tariff. So it'd be up to the UK consumer to decide whether or not they wish to, buy said American beef. And that's why it's so important that the UK government adheres to what it's already said and adheres to the regulatory system we have in place to protect food safety. Is absolutely fundamental.
Gavin, how much faith do you have in the UK government's ability to monitor the quality of the beef that will be coming in?
Well, I think it depends on how seriously the US government want to take certification and labelling and how well we police it this end. I think President Trump has given indication that he sees no issue with hormone treated beef and that it should be treated exactly the same as non-hormone treated beef. So I think the possibility of having certification their end is very small. That means how we're going to deal with this stuff coming in and how we're going to deal with it at the sort of border level within our country is going to be absolutely critical. And I think that there has to be a differentiation between what is treated with hormone and what isn't, partly because when we look further afield at a possible UK EU trade deal, that they're going to need that they're going to need that certification to prevent any hormone treated beef getting into the EU.
It always surprises people, I think, who aren't in the farming world, when they realised just how much meat comes in from a whole variety of different countries. Uruguay is one example for beef, a fairly small a market, but they are exporting beef to us. We all know, of course, that Thailand exports a huge volume of chicken to the United Kingdom. So there are systems, Charles, in place at our ports and in our international relations that already deal with maintaining standards and certification and so on. Is there any reason to think that the US would be any different in how that they would deal with the United Kingdom's authorities?
Well, they shouldn't do. I think if we come back to Gavin's point, he made about US exports of beef into the EU. Now, under the arrangements when we were part of the EU, there was something called Hilton beef. So that was US beef, which was hormone free coming into the EU. But in order to become called Hilton, it had to be classified and had to be verified by the food safety, food standards authorities in the EU, but also official vets in the EU. So there had to be assurances and mechanisms in place to ensure compliance. Now, my understanding would be, and it can again, it sort of to agree with Gavin here, it's absolutely fundamental that even at the point of when the export is shipped from the US, i.e. in the US itself, it can be checked by UK veterinary authorities or food safety authorities. When it actually lands on, in the UK at the ports, then again, checks what need to be made. But we need assurances from the government that those checks, which, I think we all agree have worked in the past, need to be able to work in the future. If we have a system which already works, obviously we don't need to fix it, but we do need to make sure that it's not undermined by potential corruption or fraud on the other side of the Atlantic.
Now, let's talk about bioethanol, because the volumes that we're talking about potentially being imported from the US are quite significant. It's hard to imagine that the UK industry won't be undercut by that. Gavin, what's your take on the impact it's going to have on farmers and the industry here?
Well, I think it's the end of the domestic bioethanol production industry on the current amount that's going to come in from the US. I think Vivergo produce about 420 million tons of bioethanol a year. I know that they haven't been doing that of late because of the price differential with wheat, and also I think looking forward, it has been a loss-making business for a while, and there have been some issues with it. But I think ultimately it was another market that was open to our cereal growers in the UK that it will now be closed, and that has to have some effect on the price, specifically of low quality wheat, which wouldn't be going into biscuit making, baking, or milling.
And Charles, I mean, this wasn't necessarily a booming industry here in the UK before. It's been struggling for a little while. Do you accept that this might be the death knell for the industry?
I would agree with Gavin. The Americans are already saying that this is a major breakthrough for the American trade policy. The Bioethanol Trade Association in the US has basically very much welcomed what President Trump has managed to do. I think it is. I think it possibly could be the final nail in the coffin for the UK industry. And if it's certainly the case that it's loss making, then I would fully support what Gavin has just said.
I was speaking to a contact earlier today who was telling me that the President Trump called Sir Keir Starmer one evening, a couple of nights before the announcement, and said, "We need to get this over the line now or never, essentially. And you need to move on one of two things. One is pork and one is bioethanol." And the Prime Minister chose the latter, is my understanding. And there are people, there are sources close to government, shall we say, who suspect that the Prime Minister and the very small number of people he was able to consult that evening didn't entirely know what they were signing up for. But the deal got done, and here we are. Just a final comment for you both, or question for you both, really, as we come to the end. Do you think that the industry is a little bit it can be a bit sort of protectionist in its mindset when it's talking about free trade deals, that we talk too much about what we have to defend and not enough about what more we can export? I'm thinking, just as an example, we have many CLA members who are producing wine. Over the next 20 or 30 years, there's going to be a huge growth opportunity for wine producers in the UK to really establish themselves as a global player, particularly as some South European countries, for example, really suffer the impacts of climate change and are maybe less able to produce the quantities that they have hitherto. Should we be talking much more about what more markets can be opened up to us when we talk about these trade deals, or are we right to be saying, no, this is all about defending what we've got? Charles, do you want to go first?
It's a question of balance. Free trade is good. Adam Smith wrote the treatise on the Wealth of Nations and basically advocated free trade. We've had free trade agreements for goodness knows how many years. We had the GATT agreement in 1994, which led to the World Trade Organization. President Trump's imposition of tariffs worldwide has simply upended the free trade relationships that everybody's had in the last 20 or 30 years. It worked when we were members of the EU. Our trading relationships with EU member states and others were excellent. So my own personal view is that free trade is far, far better than protectionism in any circumstance whatsoever. I wouldn't agree with any criticism to suggest that protecting your domestic market is a form of protectionism. It isn't. That's why you negotiate free trade agreements.
Gavin?
Yeah, I mean, I think free trade is really, really important, but it's about consistency of the products that you're trading, and therefore, verification and certification is really, really important. That you're comparing apples with apples and not apples with pears. And I would say that hormone treated beef should be treated differently to non-hormone treated beef. That's my belief. But I think that there are opportunities. There's an amazing opportunity now for 13,000 tons of beef from this country to go into the US. We know that there are very affluent parts of the East Coast and West Coast of America having those affluent consumers that really want high quality hormone-free beef from this country. So there are opportunities. But I think we have to be very clear of the threats as well. And as Charles says, it is a balance. And we are trading with a consumer an awfully long way away from us, as opposed to ones that might be just across the channel.
Yeah, we are trading quite a lot with the European Union. It's not a zero-sum game of picking one side or another. I used to work in the shipping industry, and every time I would visit a deep sea port, I was amazed at the sheer volume of countries that we had goods going to and coming back, importing from as well. So I think important for CLA members to know that we're on the case. We've already written both to the Trade Secretary and to the farming ministers, expressing our view on this and getting to that technical stage where we fully understand how this is going to work, and ensuring the UK government is on the ball in defending the standards and animal welfare protections, even after the media spotlight has disappeared. It's going to be paramount. So thank you for joining us. Charles, thank you. Gavin, thank you. We'll be back soon for another one of these videos.